where Chardonnay Drive is.
This is perfect. Should be the next one. Yes. Chardonnay.
Delivered back in here before too.
Really? Okay, so then Zinfandel Way.
Zinfandel.
Zinfandel. This is Gammy.
What's the address?
Oh, I have no clue. They all, well, it would have to be like, oh wait. I don't know if I can't see it.
Oh, excuse me. We're done?
Yep, we're done.
That's right. What's the point of having all this nice water if you're not allowed to like boat in it or something? JD's Pub. Easy Market. Panda or something? I don't think it's Panda Express.